Okay, let's do a second drawing. And if you go back to like kind of the splash screen and you click on your project, if it only has one drawing, it'll just open it up. But if you hit close, right, usually you have the ability to see on the bottom right to add another drawing to this one project. So now let's draw a different drawing, this one being taller, right? So I'm going to draw this particular object. Let's see, this one right here. And I'm just going to bring it in so you guys can see it. Something like that. And you can see how like this is a little bit different than the iPhone, right? This has got a little more complexity to it, lots of paneling, right? So the way I would approach this is once again, like start off with a sketch layer for analysis. So the first thing you analyze is this, the canvas, right? It's a portrait drawing, so I want to make sure that when I'm drawing on the right side, it's also portrait, right? You want to kind of analyze how many segments this has, right? There's this piece, right? Segment one. This is segment two, segment three, right? And then the final segment four down in the bottom. You can see that. Um, you can see that some of the segments, like two of the segments, are roughly parallel. So segment one and three are kind of running pretty much parallel to each other, right? Segments two and segments four are running pretty much parallel to each other, and all the segments are kind of converging near the bottom. So you can see how in the center it's almost like a straight line going down, and everything else is kind of radiating, right? So there's a vanishing point somewhere off the page a little bit. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. When you're actually doing this drawing, after you analyze it, you can look for these things and try to set up your own drawing so that um, you're aware of these like patterns. Okay. Another thing is like you can see how like there's always a triangle, right? So there's triangle A, B, and C, right? So you should probably like figure out how to include those in your drawing as well. So when you first start, create a new sketch layer. Use your pencil to kind of just start. So I want to transfer over some of these like layers, ideas of layers at least, right? There's an idea of having kind of a like vertical line in the center, right? And immediately I'll start like trying to draw like the edge, right? See how it. Well, I want to try to draw some like rough lines to kind of help me show this idea that it's kind of fanning out, right? And when you're doing this, you can start like kind of creating these sort of, I guess, segments on your own drawing. So segment one, and you realize that there's a little notch over here, right? So you can try to bring your part in a little bit. And I'm gonna, well, actually, I think I'm gonna focus a little bit on like the creating the parallel segments first. So maybe I'll just kind of like from these like center lines right here, just kind of draw some of these diagonal lines, right? And that should give you some, I guess, some of these, some of these segments already. So then you should pay attention to the triangles and see if you can use these like segments to help you figure out how to draw in these triangles. So got that. Let's see. Right. Something like that. Right. So once you have that, you can kind of look back at your analysis one more time, pay attention to a little bit more of the details, and you'll realize there's always a kind of a short panel at the bottom. So that's number one on segment number one. It's over at the very sorry at the very top, not at the bottom, at the very top. And then same with segment number two. It's at the very top, and so is three at the very top, and so is number four. And so you can kind of go back to your own drawing and just realize, oh, okay, there's always a short or a small panel, then a large one, right? A short panel, then a couple of panels, right? And there's more panels as you move lower and lower into the drawing. So like this is yeah, so now you can like kind of have an idea of like how complex this drawing is. And I don't need to be super accurate. I just need to have, you know, like a good number of panels in here so then people can start to see that hey, I'm actually, you know, I've analyzed this. So got enough panels in here. I think this is about the right amount of time to like switch over to using the pen, so or the marker. So I'm down to the third tool, and then the first thing I did last time was to kind of do a thick outline of my drawing. So here you can see how I'm adding this thick outline. Right. So immediately it looks like it pops off the page a little bit. Right. And I can do like a slightly thinner line that goes through because now you can see each individual segments, right? Oops. Go to yeah, so you can see individual like segments, right? Um, and this is pretty much like all the marker I need. I can do a thinner marker for like details, but I actually think this is one of the few drawings where I think the pen might work better than a marker because you actually really want this to you kind of want this drawing to have a lot of detail, right? So maybe I'll draw one more line at the bottom as a marker, right? And then I'll go switch over to pen, and the small panels will be markers. I'm gonna try to see if I can change it so that's really thin, so I can add a lot of detail without overwhelming the eye. So I want to make sure that there's details, but like the more dense the lines are, you usually want to have thinner line weights so that like it's just not just a bunch of just black lines all stuck together. So you can kind of just work on that by just making sure that like you're using thinner and thinner lines as you see more and more lines kind of come together. All right, something like that. All right, so got that detail. I can kind of draw the detail of the center panel, which I think just runs straight up. And I can actually, like if I go back to my pencil layer and add a little more detail, like remember how like there's the fanning effect, right? So I can kind of draw in like the sort of straight lines. And that kind of gives me an idea how the panels are fanning, so I can go back to my actual panel layer. And since I already drew the horizontal panels, I can create another layer that's like more specific to like vertical panels. Fortunately, I drew this vertical line already, but I think it's going to be okay. And here in this particular case, I can actually start like just adding in like details. It doesn't need to be 100% like accurate, but you can kind of start to see how like yeah, you can add just like lines in here, and then uh, sometimes you can add more detail to some of them. I'm just creating a pattern rather than like actually drawing in every single thing. Okay, so here I'm just adding in some lines, kind of following in on the fanning action, and then like noticing how sometimes there are these double panels, thinner panels, thicker panels, and just adding in that little level of detail. I'm not 100% following like what's there, but I am just adding enough of those details so that you can see that I'm following some sort of pattern. Right? Yeah. So close enough. So let's see. Is that enough? Is that enough detail for each layer? I think it's almost there. And you will be able to add more detail later, like when you get to the markers, right? When you get to the shading part. So this is a lot of detail already for these panels. So, and if you don't, you can always go back and you erase stuff, because remember, you got different. You have pretty much like a horizontal panel layer and you have a vertical panel layer. So that's helpful. Okay. Now I can go on to paint. So I'll put the paint layer at the very bottom because I don't want to paint on top of the lines. So I'll just paint in. Let's start off with like kind of lower flow, so we can do some light grays, so 30% grays, right? So maybe everything gets a little 30% gray. The sky is where it's white. So might just paint the entire thing first. Um, don't worry if you make a mistake, like painting outside of the lines and into the sky, right? Uh, you can always just erase, right? So got this 30% gone through. And notice the direction I'm painting. I'm painting from up to down, because if you pay a little bit of attention back onto back onto the actual um, the analyzation of this, you'll notice how these panels are like got these watermarks, right? Like almost like water damage, or like maybe like it's the oxidation of the material, and they're all flowing like up, right? This is a building that's upside down, so I'm not really looking at it as a building, but there's this texture that you're trying to do. So when you're sketching, you want to kind of like do that sort of layering of like the texture, like moving it from kind of down to up in this fanning motion, right? Like, so got that. So let me paint this. Well, actually, hold on. Let me erase the parts that I kind of overdid. So outside boundaries, just take an eraser and just erase it. It's much easier to erase, um, rather than trying to do something super, super accurate at that one particular moment. We can paint like really high flow, 100%, or maybe not 100, like 80% on like, like the underside. Fan often so that it doesn't spread outside. But maybe it's okay because you can see how like it also does spread outside even in the actual image itself. So, right. All right, so let's see. Let's change it up to like 60% grays. So now I can kind of deal with the darker areas. Yeah, so I'm kind of drawing on the edges. The edges are a little, or the sides of each segment is a little bit darker. I think it's really dark at the very top, so I'm going to increase the flow a little bit. something like this. And just so to give it a little bit more distinction between each panel, I might do a really low flow, like 12%. And maybe once in a while, I'll just kind of color in a couple panels, right? So some of these vertical panels, I might just add a little more detail on it so it looks like they're different. So a couple of brushes here and there. And let's see, we'll add a couple of extra. And now we're near the end. So one last detail that I find kind of helpful sometimes to do is to add a layer of just kind of, I guess, maybe even just white if you, because the funny thing is like when you're drawing the digital, you can actually use white as a color. So, be nice to see if you can use white to kind of add a little bit of color. It almost feels like you're erasing, but like I'm drawing in a little bit. So let's see if I can use a marker and make it white instead. It's a little hard, but you can see how you can add a little bit of detail. Just a little bit is enough. Once again, you're trying to pick up some, texture patterns, not necessarily like you just exactly the same as the photo, but just enough so that you can get it. So there you have it, guys. This is a drawing of, this is a drawing that you can now export. Obviously, if you were to export it, you should crop the left sides because that's what you use in analysis, right? So to export, you basically just go onto the very top, right? And you want to click on this button right here, and that button allows you to save it as an image, right? Uh, and once you have done that, um, you know, where do you put it? Save it to. Where do you want to save it to? Usually, I just hit save image, and just goes right to my photos or my image folder, and that, then I can actually like send it to myself and export it, right? And that's it. That is how you draw with a water. Well, that's how you draw with your iPad. Yeah, you can do some pretty amazing stuff with it.